everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign in real time so that you can see all the pieces and parts, thoughts and ideas, questions and comments that go into creating a fully rendered homebrew campaign using my style. I'm RJ Kerr. I'm your host, as always. And today we are going to be picking up where we left off, working on our original monster, the Berkara. Berkara. I will at some point settle on the actual pronunciation of that name. But, Bour apostrophe Kara. I guess the apostrophe in the middle will be a glottal stop. Anyway, I digress. So uh, we are going to jump into that here in a little bit. But before we do, if you're new to the channel or you've missed some of the previous episodes, I want to give you a little quick recap of what we're working on so that you're not lost. As I said, we're creating a completely custom campaign from scratch, including its own unique domain of dread. Uh, we are using a story circle structure for that. And I know that a lot of people get concerned about, using plot structures for campaigns. The thing to bear in mind here is that this is not designed to give us a rigid plot. It's simply to give us a little bit of structure from which to deviate as we create this campaign so that we have a better idea of the pieces and parts and the rise and fall that we want in there ideally. Obviously, things are going to deviate, but this gives us something to work with. We've begun filling that out, and we've already done a fair amount with that. We have figured out how our characters get into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We've talked about what kind of motivations would draw them into this domain or through this portal. We've figured out where they're going to land in a shanty town called Darkport that sits on the edge of an inland sea. There was once a thriving metropolis and has now fallen into ruin and become flooded. We figured out that the dread lord of this domain is an elemental villain that we're calling Evander, and we're still figuring out exactly how he fits into the overall scheme. Although I just got an idea about that while I was talking. Anyway, I'll put a pin in that. We have also figured out the very first adventure that will be part of our campaign here, where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielder some modicum of power over this domain. And they would come to realize that this artifact is their best hope for escaping with their lives. So now we are working on a part of the campaign where the characters get proactive, where they have a few clues of where to start looking, and they can follow those clues out to a number of different investigative scenes that have clues of their own. They can find some of those, none of those, all of those, and keep working outward from there, taking their own path towards their discovery of the artifact. And each of these investigative nodes could be a variety of things. It's fundamentally an opportunity for the characters to find clues and interact with the world and do a little bit of exploring, so you can do a little bit of world building and they can see this whole domain. And so we've done some variations with this. We've done one that is a simple social encounter, very straightforward. Talk to one NPC, get some information, get a side quest from that guy, and we'll talk about the side quest in a minute here. We've done one that is a more complex social encounter, where it is an NPC with a specific task requirement for help that comes with a variety of complications and choices the characters have to make, but still relies heavily on social interaction and dynamic. We've done one that is your sort of basic 5-room dungeon. That is a mini little dungeon crawl there. We've done one that is a heist style adventure. And now we are working on that side quest we talked before, where during the social encounter, the simple social encounter, the characters talk to a former monster hunter, and while they're trying to pull the clues out of him that they need, he is ranting and raving about his obsession, the one monster he was never able to kill, a monster that erases itself from the memories of those who don't possess a piece of the monster, and is now still out there terrorizing towns and villages and what have you. So we are building that monster today. And we're going to jump into that in a second here. But before I do, I want to remind everybody that this is an interactive live stream. So please feel free to jump in the chat with your thoughts, comments, ideas, concerns, questions, or anything else that you want to toss out there. You guys come up with some really incredible stuff. You ask some really great questions. And so please don't be shy. Even if you're watching the recording of this, feel free to jump in the comments, not just the chat. If you've got questions as we go along or ideas, I'd love to integrate what you guys come up with in future sections of this. Um, so, um, real quick, a couple points of order here. First and foremost, I am going to level with everybody here. This might end up being one of our shorter Wednesday live streams. You know how we used to do them as a half hour as opposed to a full hour, maybe closer to that because I got an hour, literally an hour and a half of sleep last night. And I am perhaps incoherent. So we will see how long I can hold out. And two, back to my comment in the introduction here about having just come up with something for Ovander here. It occurs to me that we have built this world about with this sort of around this entrance into this domain through a portal that opens up on the blood moon, and we have not tied the blood moon at all to this domain. It's just a thing that hangs out there. We should probably make it a more significant sort of factor in here. And I was thinking that maybe it might be tied to Evander. That maybe since Evander has some control over the weather and what have you, that occasionally the seas run red with his wrath, the moon changes to a red color during all of that, and that might be linked to him. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but I'm gonna sketch down that idea here real quick, just so we don't lose it. Tied to the blood moon somehow. Cool. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and jump back into our creature creation, which is actually down here and not where our adventures are. So last time we spent some time working on working on some of the evolutions of this particular monster. We figured out that it's a clone sort of creature, and every time a clone dies, it gains a new ability, and with that new ability, we have to have the progression of that. We have to know what it's going to do as the character as it advances, and we got most of these knocked out. We still need to work on our Dreadmark feature, the Toxic Skin, and the Toxic Shroud. And then we can start working on some of the harder features here. The actual stats, the stat block, including damage types and all that kind of stuff. So we're looking pretty good on this creature so far. I like what we've got going on. Before we jump into this, though, looks like we got some messages in the chat, mostly highs and hellos. So hello, everyone. Good to see Mr. Max. Mr. Max. Good to see you, Ben. Good to see you, Jonathan. A new side quest: build a rocket and go to the blood moon. I mean, it depends on the campaign you're running. Absolutely, you could, and that could be fun. That could be. I mean, okay, so there's a comment out there in world building, and I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, that if you want to make a really unique world, you got to mess with the moon. Just look at Matt Mercer. Every world that he's made has a strange moon in it. So, you know what? Why should we deviate from that? Maybe we need to make sure the moon is weird in this domain. Maybe it's always red. Maybe that's the thing. There is a cool book series called Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. That it's on my bookshelf back there, where there actually is I guess it's not necessarily a moon, but it's a sun that never sets, and it's a low red sun. So like at night, it just becomes red light all over the place. Not necessarily applicable to this, but it's still a cool little bit of world building. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump back into this. So, like I said, we've got the basic poison thing figured out here. We've got some immunities figured out. We got that kind of sorted out on what we want to do with that. We have got the ink fog idea going on here. That's pretty sketched out. We need to do the dread marked, which is a advancement of the memory marked ability that the creature starts with. We need to work on the toxic skin and how that'll work, and the advancement of the poison from just being poisoned to paralyzed. And then we need to talk about work on this toxic shroud, some sort of poisonous aura. So we had a question from Mr. Mex here. So, how often would the blood moon happen, and would the blood moon affect certain creatures? Um, super rare creatures, lol. Yeah, I mean, it could. Um, we haven't done anything with rare creatures in this domain, and I don't know how heavily they would necessarily feature since we're not doing something that's like straight kind of gothic horror. We're doing something that's more a little like coastal. Yeah, actually, to be honest with you, I think a little in some ways we're kind of doing something that's a little Stephen Kingy kind of horror. We're talking coastal towns and dark secrets and rituals and where the sea itself and the environment is an enemy and that sort of thing. So, but you absolutely could. I mean, you could also steal a note out of the Breath of the Wild and say, when the blood moon comes, the creatures regenerate. The goblins that you'd slayed come back to life. The undead rise. That kind of deal. You could do something like that. Um, I was thinking it would be more along the lines of like a red tide is kind of how I came up with in my imagination. That's sort of what I was envisioning here. The moon would turn red, the tide would turn red, and a red tide is poisonous. It's toxic, and so it could be a time when the actual where literally nature turns against the people of this domain. And we have to figure out exactly how that would work and what it would affect, and it would might affect how our villages are constructed or our shanty towns are built, that kind of thing. Because if the tide is poisonous, they might have to build them up on stilts so that they could be on the coast, but they don't get slain by this red tide that pops up periodically, but they still have access to the ocean for food and what have you. So. Certainly something to think about, especially as we build out some of these towns and villages and that kind of deal. Because really, Darkport's the only one we've put a lot of thought into yet. The rest are just kind of ideas that are out there. So yeah, I mean, we could do anything about that in terms of frequency. I recommend making it easy on yourself if you're going to track the phases of the moon, and sort of pin them to consistent calendar dates. Um, so for example, in the Forgotten Realms, um, I think this is lore accurate for the Forgotten Realms. I'll have to look up the calendar harvesters again. But typically what I do when I'm running that is that there's 30 days in a month, right? And so I'll go, well, it's the full moon on the first, and that means the new moon occurs halfway through the month. And so it's waning towards the first half of the month and then waxing towards the second half of the month. And then I just how I track the cycle there to keep it nice and simple. Um, I want to say it lines up like that with Greyhawk too, but again, don't quote me on that. But if you're doing your own world building, I recommend keeping it simple for yourself. That being said, if you want to create a full calendar that has all the phases of the moon, there's actually a tool online for that. And it literally will, you can put the days in your year, we can put how many days are a month, you can put the cycles of the moon, how many moons they're going to be, that kind of deal. And I'll see if I can find that tool for you, and it'll pump that out. I've used it before when I wanted to do something a little more complicated. And it'll give you an actual calendar with all that filled in, so you can just print it out and just reference it as you play the game. You don't have to, do all the math in your head. So it doesn't add a whole lot of task loading. Does add to notes, but hey, what doesn't? All right, so let's see here. Where sharks, where seals, where seagulls, where starfish. I want where starfish. Really, I, the were sharks. Again, today may be a day of tangents. Uh, I am absolutely exhausted, so my brain is going somewhere places. I don't know if any of you all remember when us millennials were children that there was a TV series and a whole bunch of toys where it was like anthropomorphic sharks and they were like on skates, and so they were like I don't know, I forget what the premise was, but they were like solving problems and saving the day, and they were always doing extreme sports. And I think of that when I think of were sharks. Street Sharks. Thank you, Mr. Mech. Street Sharks. Uh, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, so where sharks would just be street sharks in my mind, which would not fit into the tenor of this particular campaign, but could be really fun to work into something else. And then beyond that, where starfish. I absolutely want where starfish. In fact, Jonathan, if you come up with a stat block for where starfish, I will figure out a way on how to work it into this adventure. That sounds so goofy and so fun. And sometimes you just have to put things into campaigns that make you as a DM laugh. Um, you got to have fun. Ben, bringing us back to the point here. Appreciate that. Ben, perhaps the toxic shroud billows from organic vents on its back, maybe in a 20-foot area of effect that lingers in the area, perhaps a DC 15 con save for poisoned or other condition. Yeah, so I like that idea. I wouldn't necessarily jump to fixing the save at a DC 15 because you know, that's going to be based off of the challenge rating that we picked for this. But pretty much everything else in there is kind of what I was thinking along those lines. Although I didn't think about the vents on its back idea. That would be kind of cool, especially since we talk about this thing having kind of a chitinous, back plate. You could have it coming out of the vents there. Um, and so, uh, yeah, that that could be really cool. That could be really cool. So let's capture that real quick. Oh, looks like you've got another idea in there, Ben. Dreadmark could be like a psychic breath weapon, maybe 5 foot by 100-foot line, attack that causes fear condition by piercing character's mind with alien scream, maybe psychic damage as well. Um, yeah, so I would veer away from any of these features doing damage. Um, I would have them grant conditions um, and immunities and that kind of deal because as soon as we start doing damage in these, we're going to start changing the challenge rating of the creature. Now that being said, when we start looking at the damage stat blocks in terms of like how much leeway we have for some of these between one CR and the next, we may go back and add a little bits of damage here and little bits of damage there for some of these. But I would start without putting the damage in, just so that you don't end up accidentally creating a creature that you think is 1 CR and then is gonna absolutely wipe out your party. Which I'd love to say I've never done, but absolutely have. But and then I like the idea of it being a psychic effect, because we had talked about Dreadmark being at one point during the original idea, when I think it was Brooke who suggested it. During the original idea, their thought was that it was an advancement of the memory marked, and that it was since this creature instinctively prioritizes prey that can remember it, um, that perhaps it's an effect that it can then layer onto creatures who are marked by this memory marked ability, which we actually, as I'm reading that now, need to flesh out just a little bit more. Um, and how many creatures can it have marked, yada yada yada, that kind of deal. But this could be an advancement of that, and so it's something that like creates like you said, a piercing, alien scream within the character's mind that causes that fear effect. Um, I mean, I can certainly hear the screech that I would imagine for it, and I don't have the vocal range to replicate it for you, nor do I think my mic can handle it. But yeah, I certainly I like the thematic element of there. So let's again, I am so scattered at the moment. So let's capture some of the stuff so we don't forget it, we don't lose it, and then we will go back through and refine. So let's say billows from organic vents between the chitinous plating on TK monsters back Um, we'll say 20-foot sphere. We'll say DC XX, and we're obviously going to clean this up. I'm just capturing the details of this. DC XX. Constitution saving throw against poisoned condition. And it may seem like a little thing to, to go, well, it's just the poison condition, and this is the absolute, last tier of this, and they've, we've got a saving throw against the poison condition under, for the very first level. Why? How is this any better? And the thing to keep in mind here with this is that the first one requires that the character is struck by an attack, and then they have to make a saving throw, and it's one character at a time. Whereas this Toxic Shroud would be an every round thing for every character that comes within melee range of this creature, which means that your martial classes are going to be constantly making checks against being poisoned, greatly increasing the likelihood that they're going to get that poisoned condition and end up with that disadvantage, unless they want to take unless they want to pull back out of the sphere and take the potential attack of opportunity, which might get them poisoned as well. So it creates a decision tree where your players have to decide what is the best of two different options, of two, well, in their case, two potentially bad options. It forces some dynamic movement during combat here, or has a character, forces a character to rely on their constitution to stay in the game. So having something like that, while it seems like a little thing, it's that AOE element of it and the continual effect. Because this isn't a bonus action, this isn't a thing. It's just a trait. It just occurs. That can make it a really sticky wicket for characters during this. Especially if it can also poison them with its claws, meaning that there could be multiple saving throws per round on one character against poison. And just frankly, the more they roll, the more likely they are for it to take effect. Let's see here. Before we move on, it was Toxic Shroud. Let's get the notes on the Dread marked. Let's say Psychic, Scream, targets, creatures, affected by memory mark. And then obviously DC XX, something along those lines. Cool. Yeah, and then what we'll want to decide on this Dreadmark thing here is how many creatures can be affected by memory marked at a time. Is it everybody who has a piece of this creature? Is everybody potentially affected by it? Because that might be a cool thing to do. Because it gives somebody an incentive to risk not remembering the creature so that they can't potentially be affected by the sphere effect. So it gives somebody a reason to maybe drop the claw or whatever they have that could be on it. Yeah, so we could do something like that. Potentially do make it again an AOE sort of thing. Effects that tend to affect more than one person, are really useful when you're doing kind of a group against one monster, because it helps some of the action economy that goes on here. Little things like being able to dole out a fair amount of disadvantage to to your players while they're attacking this thing makes the monster not any necessarily harder, any more lethal to them, but it certainly makes the creature more resilient. It's going to last for more rounds, and you're less likely to end up in a situation where they just roll in and wipe this thing off the map in the first round. Um, and with fear, since they can't, if a frightened character has disadvantage while within line of sight of the source of their fear, um, and they can't willingly move closer to the source of their fear, it means that it could really kind of keep some of your melee focused characters out of the sort of uh, out of their wheelhouse, out of the melee range where they can swing their weapons and so on. Again, really changing the dynamic of the fight here. Um, so it's again one of those things that it's like I wouldn't underestimate the power of certain simple effects here. Um, let's see here. Another comment here. Ben says maybe they can be restrained. Movement drops to 0 or 10 feet only. The scream renders it hard to tell your body to move or work. Um, yeah, we could do that. If we're going to do that, and there isn't necessarily a problem with that. It's just a question of whether this targets one person or many. If we decide the memory mark targets one person, then yeah, 100% Dread Mark should make them frightened and give them the restrained condition, or, along those lines, so that their speed drops to 0 or whatever. Because then that makes it a more potent, um, that makes it a more potent effect, since it only targets one person. If it's targeting multiple people, I wouldn't necessarily make it so it drops everybody's movement to 0, or anything like that, because that can create a really frustrating situation. It's no fun when nobody can move. Um, so yeah, so that's a good question. Let's make some notes here. So memory marked affects one target or many. And I would love to hear your guys' input. Should we have memory marked affect everybody who has a piece of the monster, who has memory of it, or should the creature have to single an individual out? Um, and we'll say Dreadmark would be a Wisdom saving throw. Affects one character, or affects one target or many. And just because we have memory marked, hypothetically, if we had memory marked affect a group of characters, in Dreadmark, we could say that it only affects one, and that the creature has to pick which target it is. We don't have to say it's the same thing for both of them. It's just a question of where we want to go with this. Let's see here. Betelgeuse says, how about as an action, the creature could issue a scream that affects all who can hear it, deafening for one turn and causing concentration checks for spellcasters if they have a spell on the go. Potentially, if that was the kind of thing, I would make that something more along the lines of like a legendary action or a bonus action. You know, or work it into a multi-tack kind of thing and not make it an action on its own. Simply because if we do, this is again one creature against a lot of characters, and it's going to really throw off the action economy of this creature here if it uses an action to just to potentially break concentration and cause the deafened condition, which is not going to affect anybody in combat. Meaning that it has a round where it doesn't get any sort of it doesn't get any sort of it has no potential to get any damage in, while the characters have 2 rounds to lay on the hurt on this creature. So I mean, nothing wrong with that idea. I would change the economy on it there, instead of making an action a bonus action or a legendary action or something along those lines. Let's see. Mr. Mex says, would a predator focus on the weakest of the ones with the item? It It might. It might. And huh. Well, what if? No, no. I was gonna say, what if we combine some of the idea about kind of an AOE, psychic scream, um, that you know, that becomes part of the Dreadmarked ability, and then only the Dreadmarked can have to save against the fear effect. Everybody else has got, save against deafness or concentration. Then that ends up being, multiple saves for each character. Potentially multiple saves for a character during a single action. Um, Try to stay away from that because again, the more you roll the dice, the more likely they are to fail, and it doesn't feel good when you have somebody who, uh, you know, on with one attack rolls and then succeeds and then fails immediately after, without any other action for the creature. Um, but yeah, let's see. I think Again, I think this is really going to come down to whether this is an AoE or a single targeted effect. Um, is memory marked in AoE? Is dread marked in AoE? Or they each for a single target, or are they some combination of the two? To your point, Mr. Mex, about predator psychology, they would probably focus on one of them. I could see with that going with hey, memory marked is affects everybody who has a piece of this creature. Because it really is kind of a hunter feature here, right? Like it's really not about damage here. It's about who it's going to target, who it's going to attack, and knowing where that creature is. And then, uh, you know, then we can make Dreadmark something that it hones in on specific prey and focuses on that, creating that one effect. Or that one targeted creature. So if we wanted to kind of lean into the predator psychology on that, we absolutely could. Um, I personally, I would lean again, just eh, thinking about how the game is running here, and specifically that we're creating this monster again to stand alone against a party. I would personally choose the AOE kind of thing for this, because it's going to affect the largest number of people, and give this creature the most viability. Um, so that would be my personal take on this. But again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Um, let's see here. Ben says I would go AOE personally. Um, yeah, let's you know what let's right, wrong, or indifferent. Let's make a choice. All right, so we're gonna say multiple targets for both of these. Multiple targets. We'll put our notes down there, and then we're gonna say um, multiple targets who are affected. Oh, we already have the note about affected by memory mark. Multiple targets. Okay, cool. So let's smooth some of the wording out on here for Dreadmark. So let's say, um, ooh, yeah, I this is something I think would probably say like as a bonus action, the creature can do this instead of making it an aura effect, like Toxic Shroud. It's something that it can do, and then if you save, you're immune to it for a certain amount of time. Um, it limits it a little bit too. Um, okay, so maybe maybe there's an additional condition to the fear here. Because if we're going to say that, okay, so here's my thought process as we go here, right? So if we are going to say, hey, Dreadmark means that the creature is a bonus action, can force any creature affected by the memory mark feature, the memory marked feature, to make a wisdom saving throw, DC whatever, and on a fail, they they become frightened. But on success, they're not frightened and they're immune to this, immune to this feature for 24 hours or whatever, which tends to be pretty standard for things, for fear effect kind of stuff. Is the immune for 24 hours or whatever. That then means that it gets one of these off, and everybody who saves is just good to go, and that feature is now kind of useless. Um, or uh, or so we've got two options there. We either go back to Ben's idea and add a little more punch to this fear effect, so that it's a bigger deal if you fail this, than that, or we make it something that the creature can do every single round, and again, pump out that dread. I kind of want to make it every single round. It's atypical with fear effects. If you look through the monster manual and have you, that is it's atypical because again, you roll a ton of dice, you're going to fail at some point. But maybe it's just frightened for a round. And so we end up with this situation where, they're frightened until the start of, the the creature's next turn or something along those lines. And so it's a shorter frightened effect that happens over and over and over and over again. That could create some things. We also might then say that while affected by this fear, instead of removing the movement, maybe we go the opposite way. We say they're forced to flee, forced to on their turn, forced to use their movement to get as far away from the creature as possible, sort of forcing them back and away from this thing. Again, creating space, limiting the amount of damage that they can do to that kind of thing, giving the monster a little more durability. Yeah, maybe we go with that. Maybe we go with that. Yeah, let's write it out. Let's see how it looks, and then we'll, if it sucks, we'll delete it. It's the beautiful thing about writing on computers. All right, so as a bonus action, TK monster, capitalize that for consistency, lets out a psychic scream that can only be heard by those affected by its memory marked trait. Target creatures, actually we'll say all creatures who hear the scream must make a DC 6 wisdom saving throw, or do saving throw, let's say failure. The creature as the frightened condition until TK, until the start of TK monsters next turn, while frightened like this, target creature must use its movement on its turn to move as far away from TK monster as possible. Success. The creature is immune to the effect until the start of TK monsters next turn. Writing this out, fun little tactic occurs to me. So we talk about being able to hear the psychic scream. This means that clever players may realize that if they deafen themselves, that they may not be able to sense the psychic scream. Since we say that it's heard, we don't say that it's telepathically given. And you can go either way with that. You can write it so that, hey, that's not going to work. I personally kind of want to write it so that is a sneaky little workaround, a sneaky little a way to deal with this is that if you're willing to deafen yourselves during this, meaning that that the characters can't effectively communicate with each other unless they now know common sign language, which now exists in the game, which actually I think is a cool addition. So it changes their tactics. It forces them to do different things, and to not do the same old, which is really kind of the point of this, right? Is to get them thinking outside the box and doing things that they wouldn't normally do, because that's what's going to keep this fight exciting. Cool. I'm happy with that. I like that a lot. All right, everybody. I mentioned that we might end this stream just a little bit early tonight, and I think we're going to do that. I am fading fast here. 1.5 hours of sleep was not nearly enough for me today, so I'm going to go pass out. But thank you also for joining us. I really appreciate you guys being here. I love this time to be sort of creative in an unstructured way with you all. You come up with some amazing ideas. Ben Elder coming up with some great stuff as always here tonight, as are the rest of you. So it's always great to get your input here. One quick note about next week: we are only going to have the Monday stream next week because I will be at Dragon Con the rest of the weekend there. So if you're going to be at Dragon Con, find me, come say hi. If you're not, well, I will see you when I get back, which means that our next stream after that, I'll double check the dates and I'll let you know on Monday. All right. Again, thank you, everybody. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and like, subscribe, leave a comment. All of that helps the channel grow. There we go. Man, yeah, my brain really isn't working. So all of that helps the channel grow. So thank you again for all your support. And before I just continue babbling, I'm gonna sign off here. Again, thanks everybody, and I will talk to you all on Monday. Have a good one.